To an important anniversary. It's coming up this weekend in Washington. On Monday, it will be 60 years since the historic March on Washington and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s iconic I Have a Dream speech. The event helped bring about the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And in honor of the march's anniversary, The Hill's Cheyanne Daniels asked thought leaders in the black community about what the march means to them. Here's part of her conversation with Martin Luther King III, who reflected on his father's speech. Have a listen.
I have heard I Have a Dream thousands of times, but I've only listened hundreds. When I listen, I'm moved to tears. If we can get our nation to hear and listen, we can perhaps make the changes to create a climate for freedom and justice and equality for all humankind.
And Cheyanne Daniels, the author of that article and the producer and reporter on that video, joins us now. Cheyanne, it's great to see you with us.
Good to see you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the 60th anniversary of this iconic speech. How far has the movement come in those 60 years?
You know, that's a great question. And I think what we were hearing from so many of the folks that we spoke to for my podcast, The Switch Up, and for this video is that there has been progress made, and it's been really fantastic progress. Of course, we saw the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We saw, of course, President Barack Obama, Vice President Kamala Harris, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And so there's been incredible progress made, but there is still work to be done. And that is why they are calling tomorrow's march a continuation, not a commemoration.
Right, and so it's been 60 years. I remember covering the 50-year anniversary. It was a big deal. Is that spirit of the speech, does that speech still hold the same iconic status in American society that it did? Or are simply not enough people who remember the speech, who remember the 60s, who remember the strife and the struggle of the civil rights movement, does it still have the impact that it once did?
I think absolutely. And, you know, one thing that was coming up repeatedly was how important it was for us to hear the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King say that, you know, very seminal line about his children being judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But what we also heard from many of those that we spoke to, including the Reverend Al Sharpton and NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson, is that there were parts of that speech that talked about the promissory note that Black Americans were given, and that was given by President Abraham Lincoln, that our country has not yet delivered on. And so, you know, we're looking at this speech and we're taking away the poetry, but many of the organizers for tomorrow's march also want to make sure that the other moments of that march and that speech are not forgotten as well.
So as part of your production, you spoke with the up-and-coming governor, brand new governor of Maryland, I should say, and a prominent Black American politician, Governor Wes Moore. I want to play some of that interview right now.
Our history is our strength. Our history is our foundation. Our history is the thing that reminds us every single day that nothing is impossible. That no matter what it is that we are facing, you can look back at your history and understand, both as a nation, but also for African Americans and people of color and anyone who's been part of marginalized communities, as a people, that the progress that has been made has been hard fought.
Okay, I'm going to jump off of what Governor Moore was saying there and talk a little bit about history and specifically how it's being taught in schools. The NAACP had a quote in your article, an attempt to bring our country back to 19th century America where Black life was not valued nor our rights protected. That's a reference to the fight against AP, African American Studies and history in our schools today. What is your take on this movement now to sort of do away with the teaching of this chapter in our history?
Yeah, I think this is a very scary moment for many advocates who have been fighting for this since not just the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King, but even before him. And so, you know, one of the things that is very concerning is what happens if young Black children don't get to learn about this history in their schools, but what also happens if young white children don't get to learn about this history, and perhaps even their ancestors or their relatives who helped stand in solidarity with Martin Luther King or Frederick Douglass or so many of the others who came before them. And so this is quite a moment where I think there's a lot of excitement, but also a very big push to make sure that this history is not lost going forward.
Cheyanne Daniels, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.